Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scott Harvath podcast. What's new tonight, Mike?
Hey, well, you shouted me out for being a year older last week on the Thriller podcast feed. So it's my turn this week to shout you out. Happy birthday. I heard you had some good steaks.
I did. Had a nice weekend in Boston with some old friends. Went to a lot of breweries. Unfortunately, even though it's late in the playoffs or early mid in the playoffs, so the Celtics, the Bruins,
Right.
and then obviously the Red Sox are playing, but everyone was out of town, so I couldn't see it. Although it was kind of nice because Boston wasn't that busy, so I got to go do some things, see, and it wasn't too crowded. So
Nice.
a lot of fun. And then unexpectedly, we were recording a day late because got invited to a nice dinner on the company. So I'll take it.
Why not?
The perks of having a PhD.
Yeah, there you go. They wine and dine you, take you out on the town.
Yes.
You know who else is wining and dining us tonight with a salacious little preview for the upcoming Dead Fall releasing in July, just a couple of months away. We got the Prologue, and that's what we're here to talk about. Chris, what did you think when you first saw this email that there's a chapter excerpt ready to go, released for the people?
Yeah, no, I was super excited. I know David and everyone over at Simon Schuster does a really good job of marketing these books before the rollout. So we got Deadfall coming July 11th. And yeah, I subscribed to both the Vince Flynn and the Brad Thor cover letter. Or not cover letter, but sorry, I'm doing interviews at work. What is it called?
Newsletter.
There we go. Sorry, thank you.
Took me a second also.
And yeah, got the note saying that there was this excerpt. When I hear the word excerpt, I think we're just going to get like a couple paragraphs. And, I can read you the little couple paragraphs that were on the website. But then immediately below that, there was a button to read the entire prologue. And, while we don't get Scott, I think we get a nice feel of what Brad is sort of aiming to go at with this. And as I said in our last sort of Deadfall preview pod, I'm super intrigued. I've been, my thoughts about this war that's going on, and I'm intrigued. I read a lot about the news of what's going on. So, getting this fresh, putting, something we cover on the pod in that timeline, in that setting, really has me intrigued to see what's going on. And I think this first prologue it's kind of awkward to say doesn't disappoint because it's an event that's still going on, but it has me gripped. I should say that.
Yeah. I'm kind of I'm torn. Like, I'm balancing the fact that I want Scott Harvath, I want the crew. I want him operating the way we left in Rising Tiger. Book was so much fun, and major things happened to the troll. And it was just give me some more of that Scott. And then these last few previews that we've gotten are always prologues. And this has been happening where the prologue is this kind of, it's setting the stage. It's like you said, it's taking us into the conflict. It's describing the area of operations, the theater of operations where this book is going to play out, which is amazing. And yeah, I want to get into that. It's great. I'm just man, give me some Scott. I guess that's a trend,
exactly.
Though, right? Because a lot of the Mitch Rapp books have been doing that, where this opening scene is kind of random. Enemy at the Gates, we were in Africa with,
right,
I think it was Mukisa Adango at the hospital, and he was pretty awesome. And the warlord was coming in. I even think actually in Brad Thor, in Rising Tiger, we were in the China-India border on the Himalayas with this battle between the guys. Now, I gotta say, that works really well. And here, we have a major cliffhanger at the end of this prologue. I'm dying to know what happens to this woman defending the orphanage. So we get a great cliffhanger that really grips you in, but sometimes these characters don't come back. And in Rising Tiger, we never saw that general, that Indian general, just that badass dude who was using the knife and the hatchet and tearing these Chinese militants apart. I mean, it would have been cool to have him incorporated later on in the story, yet we didn't get there. So I do wonder, is this a character we should be invested in? Because off the bat, I definitely am. You know, she's an NGO worker. Well, she's a lawyer, but she left her cushy job in Chicago to join up with this NGO in Poland, just flew to Poland in the beginning of the war. And, you know, a lot of people were doing that. A lot of American citizens, mostly with military background, but others as well, were going to pitch in. They were flying to Eastern Europe. There was even that author. I forget who it was. He was on social media, though. He was a veteran author, and he and his wife, they just flew right there. They're like, we're going to go offer everything we can. I mean, so it was kind of cool to see this lady doing that. And protecting the orphanages is like a different spin on what we've seen. A lot of the war stories or some social media people I followed are, I'm going to use my special forces training, or I'm going to be embedded with the troops. And she's like,
Right.
I'm going to go save the children. And like, are we going to see her again? Is that going to keep up? Do we come back to this group of children and see what happened to them? There's so many things I'm left wondering at the end of this prologue.
Yeah, no, I feel exactly the same way. And, you know, I'm intrigued. Is this lady, is she going to ultimately meet her end in this next chapter? Who is the person holding the pistol? Is it,
right.
It can't be Scott, right? Because, a lot of times, we'll immediately, after the prologue, the first chapter, we'll get the, Scott, whether it be Scott, Mitch, whatever, coming into play. So is the next chapter, do we immediately cut to something completely different? We're back in the United States, or do we follow up with this scene later on? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. What would you prefer? What would you prefer is the continuation, chapter 1, right after this? I'm curious.
I think it obviously it can't. I mean, I guess I should say it can't be Scott Harvath. I don't think it's like Scott Harvath's going to come to save the day. I think like ultimately what this chapter does is just a setting to place you in a mindset of what is going on in this interaction. Ultimately, I probably think what happens is maybe when Scott goes over there, maybe we see the aftermath of this confrontation. I could see something like that happening where, maybe Scott finds some bodies, Scott finds something ransacked, or this orphanage ransacked in a way, but no one there type situation. Almost like a post-apocalyptic type movie where you have like a beginning scene, and then somehow that you see touch points later on in the movie of it.
I could see that happening. I just want to make sure we return to this. Like, I felt
Sure.
a little in Rising Tiger, that opening scene with Indy and China was never really brought full circle and back into the story. And I think
it
here,
was just
whether
mentioned, right? It was just like mentioned, like as like that this when happened, right?
Right. It was mentioned that there was a skirmish. It just never really drove the plot all that much. It was just kind of a scene setter. And I think here, this is going to tie into the plot, whether, like you're saying, we see the ruins of the orphanage, if there is utter destruction, or the woman gets taken and she's going to be some key link that once she's saved and tracked down, she can be this missing link telling us where the rest of the children are to go save or something. I would like to see this kind of tight storyline where this gripping, compelling narrative with this woman is brought into the fold and Scott has to directly interact. One other thing about the pistol is we also got to remember there's that Wagner group, or, well, we don't know who these mercenaries are, but there's like an elite,
Sure.
not elite in that they're really well-trained commandos, but they're almost like a rough around the edges mercenary group being assembled to ravage the countryside. Am I right? That was mentioned in the brief blurb that we got, that Putin just
Correct.
unleashes this like terror group to go nuts. I wonder if that's,
and I'm guessing it's Scott doesn't call them the Wagner group in the synopsis, but
Right.
Or Brad doesn't. But that's what we're supposed to pull upon, right? And what I thought was interesting is that when they're describing these guys, like they're these people that are like howling, and they're they have a skull painted on their face. So yeah, I think like maybe this could be the group, and we're seeing like I said, maybe something later on gets referenced within their own group about the interactions that happen at this orphanage or whatnot.
Right.
So,
It could be the spark that,
right.
gets Scott in there, that puts our boots on the ground, because man, these guys are just wildly firing. Like, what are they driving in just a caravan, shooting live rounds left and right? Like, it's insane. Like, it's madness. It's the chaos of war, and I'm glad we're gonna have Scott in there. Another piece of this, I remember we spoke about on the preview episode, and for anyone who missed it, just scroll down in your feed. I think we covered a few books since then, but maybe 3 or 4 episodes ago in January, we did a preview episode where you and I were debating theories and going into research of what might happen here. I remember the art and the artifacts and recovering them is going to play a key role. And I had found some article about, I believe it was this local, I forget if he worked for a church or something, but he was like a custodian of Ukrainian art and artifacts that have symbolic and cultural heritage. And he was hiding them in basements and stuff. And I thought it was so cool the way the basement and this kitchen was described. And she's making these false cutouts and these props and this bookcase that could block the entrance and hiding all the people. And they put, for the babies and the toddlers, these basically cages where they can stay and hide out. They have to suppress sound so they're not heard. I felt like we were in the caverns of a very old building. And to me, that was like exactly the research we saw, that the Ukrainians were hiding out and hiding precious artifacts in these types of places. And like, boom, we open up with that coming true, except it's people being hidden. It's children, it's orphans. It's just really bringing the reality of the war front and center in just a jaw-dropping way. And what better place to watch Scott do his business, and save the day and operate than that, when it's literally the life and death of orphans.
Yeah, and I wonder, is like, what's the play for Scott? Like, that's what I'm really intrigued about. Like,
right.
what ultimately brings him into the fold? Is it literally just stopping this mercenary group, or is it a play? I'm kind of at like, I feel like anything can happen with this novel. It's like it's very intriguing. So
yeah,
because I don't think it's going to be like our traditional. Bomb, I gotta save a bomb, gotta save like a chemical attack, an assassination type thing. It'd be interesting to just see him like being a general, like Scott has to save the day. Like he has to stop a war, try to stop a war, like that's, have we seen Scott in that sort of action?
I mean, I can think Mitch when he was on the ground in Red War in
the
Baltics, Latvia, wherever it was. Yeah, I mean, we haven't encountered.
That's the kind of vibe. That's the kind of vibe I get. Like they're coming in, and it's just interesting to see. And I guess Kyle just preempted, guessed like certain things are going to happen, but to place it so closely intertwined with reality, this one, it's so fresh, it's so prescient. I don't know. It's going to be a different one. I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. I think the closest thing on my mind, at least, is like a Red War. But then, like you say, with the reality, I'm also thinking Insurrection Day. And if you guys haven't heard, we covered Chris Howdy's novella. He writes the Haley Chill series. Absolutely recommend it. We've covered all of the books, and we're going to definitely cover the next one, which we have an advanced copy of on No Limits, the Thriller podcast feed, our other feed. You guys got to check out Haley Chill. And to me, reading this book set in Ukraine is almost bringing back that feeling when I knew I was picking up Chris's novella about January 6th. And like, we're in the Capitol building on January 6th, sneaking through the corridors. Like, that was so bizarre. Just months, maybe a year later, reading this story with a fictional protagonist, Haley Chill, that we love, happening in real life events that were like 5 miles away from me at the time. I'm going to feel that way, but about the Ukraine conflict. And again, like I said, I'm balancing a couple of different things. I am balancing, is it too soon? And I don't know if that's on your mind or anyone else's mind, because, the scourge of war, do we know what's true? Do we know what's not true? Can we really accurately reflect on, in art, what happened and the impact of this conflict while it's still unfolding? Or do we need breathing space, right? Do we have to let the dust settle and see the outcome of this thing before we start commenting on it through literature and movies and storytelling? Or no, do we need the stories now? Because the story is a vehicle to get people interested, to get people caring, and to expose people to the tragedy. So maybe we do need more storytellers here and now doing things like this. But is fiction the right way to do it? Or should it be documentary? How do you appeal to a wide enough audience while being sensitive to the fact that this is the lived reality of millions of Ukrainians, whether they're in country or they're refugees? Is it too soon to be making fiction out of it? I don't know, but when Brad Thor's at the helm, I'm pretty sure we're going to be in good hands. It's just, man, is it too soon?
Yeah, the too soon question is very interesting. Like you said, this blending of fact and fiction, what he calls faction, right? It's perfectly suited for Brad to tackle like this in a story. I think that'll be something that we're definitely going to have to parse out when we read it, when we do our pod in July. I can't believe, it's already April. It's going to be here before soon. You know it.
Oh, the Viagra.
Yeah,
the Viagra, dude. Like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Did you read that line about the Russian soldiers being fed Viagra in order to, scare the Ukrainians and perpetrate and encourage sex crimes? And I'm like, dude, that has to be real. I looked it up. It's totally real.
It is real.
Dude,
yeah.
Like, Brad Thor is the perfect person to do this. There was a UN envoy. I don't know at what level she was, but she was a representative of the UN, basically sent to report on the crisis and manage, UN interface with the UN and the conflict in Ukraine. And she literally came out and said, sex crimes are being used as a weapon of war to scare the population, to intimidate them. And I do believe Russian soldiers were found, with Viagra on them and all this stuff. I don't know. I don't know if there's conclusive evidence that it was issued by the Russian authorities. Like that, I'm not sure about. But it's very clear that there's tons of cases of rape, of human trafficking, of everybody. And he's not kidding when he says it's not just women and girls, it's men and little boys. And I think there's a line like, they were monsters, or the monsters were coming. All of that is just so real. And it's necessary to tell the story, because even you and I, right, informed readers, I didn't know that, right? Like, I knew, of course, war crimes are happening, but like that Russian troops were carrying Viagra for the purpose of perpetrating mass rape. Like, holy shit. If two informed individuals who read up on this stuff didn't even hear that note or know it was that bad, maybe we need the storytellers filling in those gaps like Brad Thor.
Right. No, I definitely think we do. And, it's one way maybe to get people, as they read it, maybe they begin to do what you did and look things up, and become more informed. Especially, I do that with historical stuff that Brad dives into, or Kyle or Vince dived into. It had me constantly, like, I would sit with either, my Kindle actual book, audiobook, and I'd have Wikipedia pulled up because I'd want to know, like, especially Brad, because, he loves the historical stuff.
Yeah.
I just want to know, all right, is this true? Is it not? Because sometimes, and then eventually, once you read like the author's note at the end of the story, he'll pretty much tell you what is true, what is not.
Right.
Also with Jack, because Jack is, a man of history as well, especially military history. So, yeah. No, I think you're right. I think Brad, maybe I would love to see what Jack would do with this, in this setting as well. But I just think like James, I don't know how I would feel about James being in, it all depends on how you set up the story. But
right.
I think Scott, where we left Scott last, I could see him operating over there a little better. So
yeah, absolutely. He's ready for that next adventure. Kind of just go save the day. Seasoned guy. Where he's at in his life is almost like exactly the people I was referencing who are in the news or on social media. Is like, I left everything to use my military or special forces training to go advise. Like, that's Scott Coleman. Well,
right.
That's Scott Harvath. It's even Scott Coleman too.
I know what you meant.
It could be Scott or Scott. They're just these seasoned, old-timey veterans, been there, done that kind of guys who can go in and embed or teach, share their skills with younger generation soldiers on the Ukrainian front and like be that gravitas, that voice of reason and experience. Because how many theaters of operations have they seen? Urban and desert and whatnot, and like, let's go. Let's get those people in the front lines. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. I don't know. Any other final thoughts you had before we ultimately come back and talk about Deadfall? In between, we're going to be covering a couple more of Scott's books. We got to record next week the Athena Project.
Yes.
After that, I think we'll probably get Athena Project full black in May, June. Then we'll take a pause, I guess, again, and then we'll cover Deadfall, right?
Yeah.
But we're about to hit. I mean, ultimately, I think we want to, maybe even after the full black episode, we will want to do a pause and like a first half discussion, because I think we're about to hit a transition between the last book. What was it? Foreign Influence, Athena Project, going into full black. We're gonna, I think we're going into like we kind of said before, early Brad, late Brad. It'd be interesting to sort of summarize early Brad. So.
I think that's the moment where we do our reflections, halfway point, pause, maybe rankings. We'll see if we rank so far the books we've covered. I think you're right, after full black. It's also a good time to pause with all the other content coming out, because on Thriller Pod, we're getting into Only the Dead by Jack Carr. Down the road, we've got Chris Howdy's next book. We've got Code Red. What is that, September? So we're going to have a summer plan here to kind of wrap up our first half of the Brad Thor books, do a pause. But then also we've got lots of other content coming on the Thriller podcast and the Mitch Rapp podcast. So,
yeah. No, we got a lot. We already started Don Bentley's series,
right?
And we gotta get some authors back on. I feel like we haven't interviewed, or I haven't interviewed anybody in a while. You've interviewed some people, but
I think we have to arrange, and it's going to be tough. Don Bentley, Kyle Mills, man, if we can get them together, that'd be A+. But at least having both of them on to talk about the transition. So
yeah, and if we can get Jack and Brad this summer, that'd be awesome too.
That'd be really good. Yep. Lots of things. Oh, I guess one last thing about the preview though for Deadfall, we didn't get the audio clip, because I feel like the Mitch Rapp previews, we have gotten a little bit of George Goodell. You get like 20 minutes, 30 minutes of George Goodell. I would like to hear that. I think this would be a really good prologue to be told in an audiobook. It would just be haunting to hear this read to you. And I don't know about you, but when I hear an audiobook, I feel like I'm transported there a little bit more if I'm focused than if I'm reading it on the page. I feel like hearing the audio in Ukraine of this woman saving this orphanage would just be super cool to hear that read aloud. So I'm really looking forward to the audiobook.
Armin Schultz, he's the man. He's the man for Brad. So, all right, guys, we need to thank our patrons. Our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, just let Scott be Scott.
Dude, about traveling heavy, do you think we go elsewhere in this book? Or is this going to be like Brad's opportunity to just stay in one place, like he kind of did with India in Rising Tiger?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's kind of, the last couple has toned it down a little bit, stayed a little more focused in 1 to 3, 5 given places, as opposed to
not 18,
18, 20, 25.
I think that's something we're going to reflect on with early Brad versus later Brad. I think one of the changes is he definitely dials back the traveling heavy in his mid and late books compared to his early ones.
Definitely.
He's too ambitious. Just too ambitious.
Well, Scott's getting older,
That's true. Can't move around.
He can't handle all that moving around.